the speakers and just, put in a lot of thought and effort to organize today. So thank you, Daniel, Dawn, Elizabeth, Katie, Kevin, Matt again, Ray, Sean, Sophia, and Vinod. And I left myself out. How are we doing on the stream?
Good.
We're good? We're online? So welcome everyone online as well. Happy that you are able to join us. We have a channel on Slack. So if you are in the CHAOSS Slack, find the CHAOSScon channel. This is where you can ask questions throughout the sessions. We can talk about it. I see many of you have laptops, so feel free to be really active there and talk with each other while we have the conversation and the speakers. And that way, everyone who is online can also join. And we can bridge that gap and hopefully have a really awesome conversation overall. We have a code of conduct. We welcome everyone to be here. If you have any concerns with anyone who is here, or you feel like you're not being respected or whatever, please let me know. Or Amy, can you also?
Yeah.
Thank you. Or let Amy know. You'll find us on Slack or here. We have, at the end of our program, lightning talks. We still have some slots open. This is where, if you have an idea, you just want to surface it, bring something to the attention, have a point to discuss, whatever it is, you get 5 minutes. Let me know. I'm happy to put you on the program. We still have some time. And this can be, you don't need any slides. The nice thing about the lightning talks is you can just come up here and bring whatever is on your mind to the community. We have one break in the middle today, and we like to take a picture and create that memory and capture it in a nice picture that we can then share afterwards. So I invite you all during the break to, but I don't think we have decided where to take the picture yet, but be prepared that we take a picture together. At the end today, we have a few social activities. I think at around lunchtime, we don't have anything formal planned for lunch, but you're all welcome to look around, see who is going for lunch, and then continue the conversations from our little conference over lunch. So that's my encouragement. See who else is around here and try to find lunch together. And then we have informally organized, if you were in the Slack channel over the last couple months, you might have seen it. At 3 o'clock, some of us are going to the Jameson Distillery for a tour. I don't know if tickets are still available, but you can try if you're interested. At 4 o'clock, there's a cask draw, and then at 5:30, there's a Dark Dublin guided tour.
And there are tickets for that. I looked the other day.
Awesome. So tickets for the evening event at 5:30 are still available. Thank you, Amy. So you're all welcome to join. Matt, did we hear anything about the coffee? Coming? Okay. So we have coffee here. Otherwise, out in the hallway, there's coffee. Restroom signs are also out there. So I think we're all good and settled. Is there anything else that, before we get really started with the program, that you would like me to mention?
Live stream is good.
Live stream is good?
Yeah.
And then the survey is the other thing. So as CHAOSS, we are really wanting to center diversity, equity, inclusion in what we are doing. And we have a committee that has been working for the last year or maybe even longer, on looking at how we are doing what we are doing. And so now is the time where we want input from all of you, and we are hosting a survey to ask, about your experience in the CHAOSS community. So we have this community survey coming up. Go to the Slack channel. Elizabeth is online. Thank you, Elizabeth, for getting up super early and joining us today. It is, I believe, 3 o'clock for her right now. 4 o'clock now. Okay. So you find it on Slack. That's where we will promote it. Any other points of order that you would like me to mention? Well, I have a little personal note. I'm going to be legally a father soon. I'm adopting. So, thank you. So to warm up for that, I prepared some dad jokes for today. So I have some here because I need to practice. The first one is, don't trust atoms because they make up everything. Okay, getting there. Okay. The first speaker today, we're a little bit ahead of time, but I think that's okay. The first speaker for today is Daniel, who is going to talk about the collaboration as a key health indicator for open source communities. And because we're ahead of time, it means we have more time to discuss after the talk, which is awesome. Do you have your own laptop? Do you want to? Awesome. Yeah, you're welcome. You can unplug me.
Hi, do you hear me? Is it working? No, now it's working.
Perfect.
Good. Good. Awesome, it works. Well, thank you, Pierre, for your introduction for today. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. So thank you all for coming, and for those that are here virtually as well. So yeah, happy to be here. So let's start. Today's presentation, by the way, disclaimer, I haven't had coffee yet, so just in case. So today's presentation is about collaboration. Probably, well, in case you don't remember, I've been presenting some analysis on collaboration and how this works, specifically in the Cncf ecosystem. And then the time I sent the proposal, I thought about, well, maybe it could be good for a CHAOSS community to extend this, because, well, open source is about collaboration, right? Everything is about getting together. For instance, chaos. There is a mission, there is a vision for the project. We are trying to do something together, right? If you go to the definition of the Wikipedia, it says, well, collaboration is the process of two or more people, entities, organizations working together to complete a task or achieve a goal. I think that's a really good definition for collaboration, and this is what we are doing here. We are basically two or more people or two or more entities or organizations working together, discussing about the value of metrics, or working together from the metrics part, from the software discussions. And well, of course, open source communities is all about this. It's about collaboration, basically, right? It's about people working together with a mission. Doesn't matter where we are, doesn't matter where who do we work for, but the thing is about that we are building something together. So the question here that we are started with, that by the way I did this in collaboration with Miguel Angel, which is another Vitergian. What does it look like collaboration in open source projects, right? So then I started gathering some networks. I said, okay, we have some networks on the top left that are like less dense, perhaps. We have others like at the bottom left that are like they have a really high density. So it's about understanding the shape and size of communities, right? If we go into the communities themselves, then we see this is Wikimedia, this is OpenInfra. Well, OpenInfra, it's about 3 of the projects that are StarlingX, Kata containers, but it doesn't include OpenStack, for instance. But this is I'm playing with the data I have, let's say. Open Networking Foundation, CHAOSS, of course, which is at the bottom left, OpenShift, and Johns Hopkins University with the Usability. So all of them are publicly available dashboards that you can play with. And what I did was, okay, let's go and visualize what does it look like. Just for the records, if you see small dots, like the green one that you can see on the top right, those are developers. And then there is a connection with a blue square. If the blue square is a project or a repository, so there is a connection if that person, that developer, produced something, for instance, a commit in that project, okay? So then we can see, in this case here, that Gabriel Birk from Wikimedia Foundation has participated in fundraising donations in the Wikimedia Foundation. So this is what we can say, there is this. And then you keep matching and creating those edges, and then finally you have these wonderful and nice things. So some visualization highlights. And then, well, the title of the talk said something like key health, KPIs or so. But in reality, that discussion I'd like to have with you afterwards. Okay, so I'm kind of bringing ideas to the discussion. So some highlights. First, if you check the projects, we can see that there are projects with certain collaboration happening, okay, because we have dots that are participating in different projects, and then it happens that a developer may participate in more than one project, so then we are kind of creating right in the middle, like this collaboration. Collaboration is taking place right in the middle of these orange circles. But then there are isolated projects. So we can see that there are isolated projects. Isolation happens in open source, right? And then there is one developer participating in one repository, 2 developers participating in one repository, right? There are some developers creating some kind of a small network, participating in 3 or 4 repositories there. So that's one thing. There are cases, even in the same project, where we see collaboration and where we see isolation. Others, well, I'm still learning to pronounce archipelago. Does it work? No. Well, kind of. Okay, good. Thank you. So it's like we have like really dense, really continent communities, right, on the left, and then we have others like they are islands. They are islands of, there is an island here of developers, there is an island there for developers. So collaboration is perhaps less dense, right? So CHAOSS, we can say that there's like a high density. There is a lot of collaboration all across the repositories and projects. So that's happening. There are, as you can see here, I don't know if we go for the 200 developers or participants. This is for the last years, okay? And then there are people participating here and there. Then there are those communities, as for instance in CHAOSS, where we have developers of just one project. They are participating there. They are really highly specialized. They are really focused on that project. And then we have developers, as we can see here, that are participating in more than one. So they are kind of getting an overall understanding of the community, right? And they can act as those helping to flow the information from one place to the other, right, in somehow. So then we have these specialized developers, but then we have developers that are participating here and there. Then of course, I mentioned before the word density. We have projects with a really high density, and then we have areas in the projects that are really light if compared to the others, right? So then we have like these really light areas, but then we have like the core of the project with a lot of developers working there, okay? And then even in the same project, we see cases where there are two continents, for instance, right, open infra. So I think the one on the right was, I don't remember right now, but I think it was Starling case, if that makes sense. We have the Digo here, so maybe you can say if this makes sense. Okay, so we have Starling case. So there are no connections with other projects in the foundation on the left. In this case, Kata Containers and Sul, which is the other project we are analyzing. So in these three projects, between Sul and Kata Containers, they are working a lot. There is certain connection here, as you can see. There are like 2 stars, right? Here at the top and at the bottom. But then there are no developers participating in the 3 projects, for instance, or in one of the 2. In the case of the Johns Hopkins University, then we can see that there is like a continent at the north, and then there is a continent at the south, and there is no connections between both of them. So why is this happening? Is this healthy? Well, I don't know. I can say that. I simply don't know. And then, of course, something that we have already studied in CHAOSS is organizational diversity, areas of expertise, where developers are participating, and then we can see like all of the projects that are, all of the organizations that are participating here and there. So, good morning. This is the size and shape of those open source communities. This is the size and shape and the visualizations of what open source may look like. There are different attributes that we can play with. So projects are interconnected. We can see that there are developers here and there. Organizations and developers engage at different levels. Of course, open source projects without contributors are dead, of course. And without collaboration, I would say they are dead as well, because collaboration is like an intrinsic attribute of the open source community, right? So what is a healthy collaboration? So well, then it's when you start discussing, with yourself about how can I formalize this? Okay, well, what is a graph? Let's start with graph theory, really basics. I'm not doing something really complex here. So the idea of a graph is that this is a representation of a network somehow with a set of connected elements. And then we have the nodes, as you can see, and then there is a connection if we have an edge. And then of course you may have a click here, which is like a network of them, and then you have like a circle, right? So this is like the definition of a graph. You can have, of course, directed edges or not. In the previous examples, I didn't use them for anything. And then you can start creating collaboration. So in the case of open source communities, we can say, okay, we have a developer, and there is a connection with another developer if they have participated in the same repository. That might be one of them. But we can create others, which are closer to the previous ones, to the first examples. We have a developer, and then we have projects, and then there is a connection if a developer has produced something in that project. So that's another way of defining collaboration, right? And then you can have these links. Then you can have a thicker edge if there are more contributions, for instance, or you have a bigger dot in the case you want to use other metrics, as for instance the number of commits or the number of pull requests. So you can start playing with the data and visualize things in these ways. So I think is how to measure collaboration from a network, right? What are the properties that matter here? So there are these 3 in general. We can go for others. So hope you can read it right at the bottom, at the end of the room. So basically, we can go for adjacency, degree, and connectivity. So for adjacency, basically it's about 2 nodes that are, if there is an edge between them. In the case of edges, this is when you have a node between them. The degree is how many connections my node has. So for instance, with how many projects I'm participating as a developer, that would be my project's degree, if I can say that. Or with how many developers I'm participating in the same project. So then that would be like my degree, how many other developers I have certain connections. And probably I know them from working in the open, maybe in a pull request or maybe in the file, because we've been working with others. So then you can start like creating are building like this trust network, right? So you have a developer that has participated with another because they have reviewed each other, and then you can go to the next one. So you are kind of building something there. And then connectivity. So basically, a node is kind of connected to other if there is a path. So that's connectivity. You can be closer, you can be a bit more far away, but that's it. So these are somehow the properties. And then we have the betweenness centrality, which is about, we can say that this might be the concept of influence. Okay, so if you are wondering how much influence my company has in this open source project, then you may start discussing about, okay, maybe it makes sense to understand how many people are right in between everyone in the community, right? So for instance, here the example, the node A, which is right in the middle, has a betweenness of 1. Basically, is between all of the nodes here, right? So that's an example of this centrality. So the node A has a good understanding probably of the other developers because that person has participated with here once and again. A good example probably of someone with a high centrality here in CHAOSS are the chairs. So maybe German Prey, maybe Georg, Nicole is not here today, and some other people that have participated all across the community, have had discussions with everyone here in the community. So if we try to analyze maybe the emails, the mail list, we go for the commit activity, we go for the repositories, then we'll see that these people have a really high centrality. And they are perhaps not even producing code, but they are really, really important for the community because they are the ones helping to, to have the information flowing once again. So, analyzing a real network. So, ideally, well, one of them is, as we mentioned before, the adjacency. So, the contributors nodes that are here and there, and with how many of them we have here. So then, for instance, if we go with this developer here, then we only have a degree of 1. Yeah. If we come here, then we have a degree of 2. Okay, perfect. And connectivity, that's another discussion, which is the highly connected network. So can we guess what are our continent communities and what are our archipelago communities? So probably yes. And what does it mean from the open source perspective? That's the answer I don't know, I don't have, but probably I hope we can answer this all together. Betweenness centrality, for instance, in these examples, the ellipses here they don't have a really high centrality, but if you check the two circles, basically they are between this community of people and this community of people. And the same with this one, this community of people and this community of people. So these two nodes, they have a really high centrality, at least if compared to the others. So those are the, people connecting others. So, collaborating to define collaboration. Of course, we have CHAOSS, and there is a work in progress. So in case you are interested here in the metrics model working group, there is a discussion. I came late. The surprising thing here is that when I sent the proposal, this didn't exist. But then after like a week or so, I realized that this work was happening, or I didn't know about this, and then I realized this happened after. But the thing is that this is happening, and there is a discussion about influence and centrality and so on. So if you have, you would like to participate, metrics model working group, and this is already going. You can join the Slack channel for this. And of course, as you can see, we are defining, okay, what is influence? What is the centrality algorithm, the graph construction? So we are discussing basically about the things that we are mentioning here. And then I wanted to bring some other examples, just for the records, like collaboration in practice, if that makes sense. So one of them is the Santander Bank. They are running an inner source program office. If you know the term of inner source, so inner source is about bringing the good practices of open source within the walls of organization. So that means transparency, that means collaboration, and so on. They were really interested in measuring collaboration. So they want to understand what collaboration means for Santander. They were working basically all across different countries, and they wanted to do it together, basically, like in an open source way. So collaboration and inner source are really key concepts that really go together in this case. So collaboration can be measured in inner source, and this is one of the examples. Another thing is a paper we released like 2-3 years ago with Red Hat, with Diane Mueller, and basically it's about understanding collaboration, size and shape of the Cncf community. So what you can see here in the graph is Cncf, and this is just for the records Kubernetes, and there are some projects as Prometheus, OpenTracing, gRPC, and everything you can see right in the middle, all that mess, that's collaboration. So that's the beauty of collaboration indeed. And then the final one is this one that we did together with Mozilla Foundation as well. So you have the URL there. It's a really beautiful report, and it's about understanding the interconnectedness of their community, from users to developers, and how they are working together. And we specifically didn't build those graphs, but the data used was basically Vitergia. At that point in time, we had an agreement with the Mozilla Foundation and so on. So that's a really interesting, from a community perspective, analysis. So just in case you'd like to have a look at it, it's publicly available. And this is it. A bit about me, by the way. I'm part of the CHAOSS community, part of the Inner Source Commons as well, and CEO at Vitergia. So my email address and Twitter in case you'd like to connect. Just to thank you all for your time today. Really quick, thank you for your time. Questions? Comments? Is there time for questions?
10 minutes. Yeah.
We can go for the next one. We have more time for coffee later. So.
There was a question in Slack about what you use to generate the visuals.
Yeah, so CHAOSS technology, remote lab. Okay, specifically, so in Vitergia we are building Vitergia Analytics, which is built on top of remote lab. So you can run it using remote lab, but the graphs, as they work, they are part of the publicly available dashboards that we are producing for some customers in Vitergia. So those were done with Vitergia Analytics, but the technology and everything basically is the same. So it's remote lab in CHAOSS. So there is, it's Elasticsearch and Kibana. What we have on top of this, free open source version, by the way. There is a visualization part that you can build things, and then there you can see all of the charts available. So one of them is an import. So this is the way to do it. More questions? Yeah.
I have a comment and a question. The comment is you said open source projects without collaboration are bad. I think that's a bit too much. I think there are certain projects which are perfectly fine without collaboration, or with little collaboration, like a very stable project, or an experiment, or something where you just want to make research results transparent, so they're not supposed to change. They're just be there in the open. So I think that's something we should consider. Not that you always have to go for a huge community, but you also can go for a small community, or maybe no community. That's better as well. That said, I think it's very interesting to look at this collaboration. And what would be interested in is you showed this graph with projects and collaborators. And I think we only looked at commits, right?
Yeah, for this chart.
So I'm wondering if you look a little bit deeper, like frequency of commits, or for example, difference between author and committers, or maintainer, for example, might not write code, but only check in the code. So this might show up in a very different way. If you look into that, if this was a simple graph, this maybe already good enough, but you don't have to do into these details.
Well, going to the first part, I agree with you. So yes, you're right. And then going to the second part, we have not had to look at it. So what we added was basically more data sources. So it's about people producing things in different projects. So then if you are working in the same project and perhaps adding issues instead of having commits, then the graph keeps growing. But I have not entered into those details, so these are very interesting. So if you have, we can talk later. Try to bring, make sense of this. Thank you.
On a very similar note to that, have you considered looking into you saying these types of going through PRs, the conversations that are happening through issues or PRs, and seeing how the interconnectedness can happen there?
We've produced some of those charts in this case. From that perspective, when we were doing that, that was mainly about learning from how people interact with others and looking for the concept of mentorship. If there are people that are participating, more in the community, not helping because we don't know unless we go to the data itself, but at least networking with others in the issues and so on. Well, I didn't compare with these big charts, and that was like in a smaller subset of the thing. So yeah, but the idea here is that as you can connect nodes with nodes, ideally you can produce any type of collaboration. So these are really great examples, and probably those are really good to move into the metrics models discussion. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I also wanted to kind of add a comment and raise sort of a question. You had a slide where you showed I think the text on the slide said silos when there were, projects with their graphs and there were no connection between them. So I think that one is interesting from the perspective of how much context matters when it comes to these metrics and graphs, because you mentioned Kata containers and starting X. Now, they are projects that are supported by the Open Infra Foundation who I work for, so I personally know that they are separate projects that are standalone and their scope doesn't really have a lot of overlap. So I personally do know why they are completely separate and don't really have connection on the level of commits and who is working actively as a code contributor in those projects. But someone who doesn't know that and just see those two separate graphs in one group, they might come to a different conclusion if they don't look into the details behind why the graphs look like how they do. However, at the same time, I kind of wonder if it makes sense to look into communities from communication perspective. Like, for instance, users tend to be active on the mailing list, talking to people, trying to figure out how these projects work, and maybe they use the two together, and they're communicating in both communities. So kind of looking into the connection between projects from that perspective. Do you think that would make sense?
Totally. Indeed, I remember, so I think the first one is about now using the habit criteria. So when we go to customers and we have discussions like this, the person in front of us is bringing like the context, the knowledge of the community, and we are bringing like data skills. And then when we have this together is when basically magic happens. Is when you have this, because we are pointing to, oh, this seems to be happening here, and so on, and you say, well, that makes absolutely sense because this or that. But maybe you see the other thing and you say, it doesn't make sense here. So why is this happening? And this is where this is. So that's one thing, and specifically in the case of, for instance, another example I wanted to bring, this happened in the case of the Cncf analysis with Diane in this case. And we discovered that through the communication channels, there was a person that was really valuable for the community, and that this person was named as MVP, let's say, for them. But he didn't communicate even a piece of code. It was all communication in Slack. But we saw that person because he was like in between certain people in Slack and so on. So, and then the community said, this person is important for us, because that was kind of a voting process from everyone. So, yeah, these are really good examples to bring here. Context is definitely important. Running out of time for questions? Yeah.
I have a question about the data collection methodology.
Mm-hmm.
So when you complete a project and put in the information from node and all of that, or you take the project, find user contribution, find what else they can use to adding more graphs project and building out and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, if you filter your data to begin with, that will look what you can do how they get the data. That's when you say
In this case, so the data presented here is based on the data gathered by each of these different foundations or projects. So those are the constraints or the limitations of this. And then what we did was to go there, thank you very much. And then we visualized everything in the chart. So through Kibana, in this case, the interface, you can filter, you can apply those filters and so on. And then you can say, well, maybe I want to filter out bots, which is one of the things I did. And then I want to filter out these projects because they are false. And then I want to do that. So in this case, we gather everything and we ignore, we gather everything, we prepare all the visualizations, and then we apply filters to the visualizations, so they were basically a bit smaller. And then this is what I presented. Okay. I think we are done. Right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. Also great conversation afterwards. Thank you everyone for asking excellent questions. It's, with conferences like these, questions are a form of love, so thank you for showing your love and appreciation.
YouTube, can you turn on live transcripts? Is that an option? How did the live transcripts that go? I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
So the next speaker is a pre-recorded talk. It's by Atinuke, who is talking about sustainability, tips on building a healthy open source community. So while I'm setting that up, I have a question for you all. I'm curious where everyone is from, how far you have traveled. So if you have traveled, or I'm just curious, who is from here, from Ireland? Awesome. Who is from Europe? Yeah, awesome. Who has traveled from further away? Okay, that's still a large group. Maybe we need to separate that out. Who's from the Americas, North or South America? Most of us. Anyone from Asia? Awesome. Australia? Long shot. Okay. Which country's capital is growing the fastest? Does anyone know?
Can you read the question?
What country's capital is growing the fastest? It's Ireland. Every day it's Dublin.
Hi everyone, welcome to CHAOSS Europe Conference 2022. I am so excited to be here and I'm so pumped actually. I'm really pumped to be here. So my name is Atinuke Oluwabamikemi and I'm from Lagos, Nigeria. I'll be speaking on sustainability, tips on building a whole healthy open source community. I know the talk have been around sustaining open source, right? And we are saying in the next couple of years, what's going to keep open source in existence is community, right? Now, we want to talk about the importance of having a healthy open source community. Once again, I'll be just me to Oluwabamikemi. I am developer manager at Tunga.io. Tunga is a staff augmentation company. We connect African developers with Europe clients. And I'm also volunteering as community manager at Layer 5. Layer 5 is like my big I'm a big fan of open source, yeah. So Leather is an open source community that works with Kubernetes and meshes, build meshes and well mesh. And yes, I am also the front-end community lead for Shipcode Africa, and Shipcode Africa being Africa non-governmental community where we advocate for more ladies to get into the tech space, and of course open source, right? So yes, this is me. And let's go. Okay, so and I have limited time, so I'm just going to like brush through everything, right? And I'm just going to leave this slide for folks to be able to like catch up with later on. But then we would want to ask ourselves like, what is open source community, right? And for me, I would say open source community is like a place where we all come together and share common value. That's community. Now, talking about open source, it's now like where people come together from all over the world to contribute to a particular project, right? So the sweet part of it is that open source has made it very, very easy for folks in different geographical area to work on a single project. This is so interesting, and that means that is bringing room for more collaboration, right? Is letting different people, African, Europeans, Asians, they come together and work on one single project. So now, let's just go in. So you might want to say that why should the community be healthy? You all can just like come and just contribute to the project and get on to your life, right? But then, it's like I said, it aids better collaboration because it gives room for people. I mean, I have been in a room where I'm working with folks that I might never have met in my entire life, staying in Lagos, Nigeria. So this is what open source does. It brings people together to work on a single project, right? Even multiple projects, as the case may be. Then it's a sustainability of the project and of open source in general. So if you're saying that it hits sustainability of the project, that means that when you have a project, when there is an open source community for that project, it makes the project to keep growing, right? So that's when you have version 2, version 2.2, version 2.4, and like that. That's because it's making when you have this project and you have users that uses this particular tool, and they give you feedback. So it is easy for people to even like come around and work on that feedback. Now it may not be feedback, it may be like another folk just jump on the project and just check through and be like, oh, something may be changed in this project, right? So it aids the sustainability of that project, hence aiding the sustainability of open source in general. I'm sorry, I might be talking so fast. That's what we have today. So again, you say that what makes a healthy open source community, right? Now let's go to the tips why we are here. First is community first approach, right? You want to make your community member feel welcomed. You want to make it feel at home. So I was writing an article of recent, which was yesterday, and it's like I was saying community in a glance, right? At a glance, right? And what came to my mind is our sense of belonging, right? I know that most times we all like try to fit into a specific place. We want to fit in. We want to be noticed. We want to be acknowledged, right? And then you bring folks together with like minds, right? And with common interest, that wants to share common value. You bring them together, right? So when you make your community a welcoming space for someone that is trying to fit into a particular place, right? It makes the community grow more. It makes the community healthy, because when I'm coming to the community and I have a sense of belonging, right? I feel like I belong here. I want to stay. And as I'm staying, I also want to invite others, right? So that brings the community to being healthy. It sustains the project more, it sustains the community, and in general, it sustains open source. Another thing, yes, I got this from the experience is a great person in the community space, not generally open source. But then he actually talked about something that's really interesting, which is some people actually struggle with form of relationship, right? They have some kind of like they are not probably good with talking outside or showing themselves, but one-on-one conversation is needed. That's where community too comes in, right? You don't have to just like bring up a project or just for requests, send a PR, get your PR merged and all, right? You want the community member to know that they are in a place where they are valued, right? Where they are valued, and also where they are giving value, where they are giving value back to them, right? So it's a two-way street, right? I am giving you value, I am also giving you value in return. So you want your community member to feel that way. You want them to feel that community is home, right? They feel safe. It's a safe space. It's not where they just punch yields. So that's one thing I love about Layer 5, about chaos, because I've been in chaos for a while, even if I'm not like really active. But chaos feels like home, and that's why I remain there, right? It's amazing how they make you feel welcomed, how they make you feel like, especially in my group that's the diversity and inclusion, the way we come to meetings and like talk about our day, talk about what is going on in our lives is super. You want that kind of relationship in community, and that is really, really important in building sustainability of open source. Then also improving onboarding process. Improving onboarding process is also important, because you don't want a community member to be lost when they get into the community, right? Ignore my name, actually. You don't want a community member to be lost. So improving onboarding process is also important. Make sure you go through the step-by-step from welcoming them to explaining every detail of the project to them, so they don't get lost. Because sometimes what makes some people leave a community is probably they are lost. They do not understand the project. Make the project as easy as possible for them. Then another thing is accepting and implementing feedback from members. Feedback is important. They will have suggestions, they will have feedback. Don't make them feel like you are not listening to them. Don't make them feel like their suggestion or their feedback do not matter, right? So it aids sustainability of the project when the community, the maintainers take feedback and they implement feedback. It's not all feedback we implement anyways, but the important ones and the ones that you know that it's going to serve in the community, you implement them. And even the ones that are not like good for the community, you can communicate back to them and say, oh, this is why we are not doing this, this is what we will be going with, and make them see reason. So not just like you shut them out, right? So another reason is make your project easy to contribute to. This cannot be overemphasized, because like I said initially, explaining the project for them and make it to make it easy as possible is very, very important. if one gets to a community and you want to contribute to a project, and the project is just so hard to contribute to, I mean, there's a lot, tons of open source communities, right? You may just move to the next. So making your project easy to contribute to is what enhance the sustainability of open source and increase the growth. So these are some facts according to GitHub that you all can go through later on. Then providing a well-detailed and structured code of conduct and enforcing it. It's important for a community to have code of conduct because, like I said, people are coming from different areas, they are coming from different places, and they are coming with different mentality, right? They are coming with different orientation. You want to tell them that this is how things are done here, and you have to abide with it to be in this community. Yes. So this is a scenario by Ben Belter. I'm sure some people might have come across it. I just find it phenomenal because it's like a real life scenario that happens, and it's really, really amazing. I think something I didn't add is your documentation, and that should be where I said making your project easy to contribute to. Documentation is important, right? I didn't mention that. So you can as well just read that all. Documentation is really, really important. Incomplete or outdated documentation makes it very hard for people to contribute to your project. So yes, again, talking about the word dinner party scenario. The word dinner party scenario is something about helping come up with, and when I read it sometimes last day, it ate me because it was like a life thing. When I was saying that contributing to open source or community is like a two-way street. You give value and I give value back to you, right? So that is just what this story is about. I was talking about how when you organize a party, you organize a dinner party and you are the host, say the maintenance, right? And you invite people, the contributors, to come to the party, right? To come contribute and eat, whatever. And they bring gifts to you. You welcome them with open arms. That's the whole scenario, the whole dinner party scenario still boils down to the whole designer thing. So welcoming them, you onboarding them, making it community first approach, right? Then they also bring gift for you. That's them contributing to your project. You show them around, you introduce them to other guests, right? That's where the collaboration with other contributors comes in, and that's also where you are making the project easy for them to contribute to. So this board party is like a great dinner party. Is like a great it's a great scenario for this discussion. Anyways, so I'm just going to be leaving you with this and this and this because I know I have used up my time. And yes, community managers are the best. I know we have a lot of them in the open source space, and I'm so happy and excited to be part of this space. I hope to see you all again, probably next CHAOSS conference, and probably I'm going to be doing physical. You all are the best, and I wish you all the best. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you. Next up, we have Katie with building bridges with badges, how metrics help you find the right crowd.
Katie Schewitz. I am a Senior Technical Project Manager over at Indeed, and I am involved with the CHAOSS DEI badging project. And before I went to Indeed, I was working with an open source platform with IEEE SA Open and working to develop a badging initiative over there. Badges are, I'm sorry, oh goodness sakes. Technical difficulties, computer has not had enough coffee. So, what is a badge? All of you have had some sort of a badge. It might have been a little plastic toy that you stuck on your shirt when you were a kid. It might have been a sticker on your college notebook. It might have been something you put on GitLab or GitHub. It could be something you had on your Girl Scout uniform or Boy Scout uniform. It is anything. The sticker that says that you're the best cat mom is a badge. A badge is what you assign value to. And it is not something that has a monetary worth. It is not something that any of us can identify as something of value. It is something that identifies us. And in the open source community, we have honed in on 3 categories of badges. We have the event badging, we have project badging, and we have badges for individual contributors. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the event and project badges because people need badges. It helps grow your project and your event. And those badges, you want them to easily convey important information that is meaningful to your intended audience. These 2 badges up here do not have any context around them. You probably recognize one of them. The other one, maybe a few of you do. The first one is our DEI badge for CHAOSS, for the event badging. And it is a gold level badge that an event can earn when they apply. If you look at the second one, that's a Girl Scout patch. A early high school level girl could get that for doing a science experiment. And not many people out of context would know what either one of those mean. They are very specific to different communities. So if you have a project or an event and are looking to give credibility to it, you want to reach specific communities. And those communities could be the volunteers or your participants. But for this matter, let's think about how we want to attract volunteers. When you've created an event, you've applied for badges, or it's an ongoing event that's been going on for multiple years, and you have a firm understanding of what that event represents and means, or your project. I guess, can somebody tell me in CHAOSS, an open source event, what's an important thing that you want to convey to your audience? Anyone?
Is it shooting in front of a bad reviewer? So yeah, projects.
projects have a goal of attracting valued contributors and reviewers that for the event badging that could be valuable. Maybe those contributors though, they have different interests. We want to grab them for the interests that they have pertaining to our projects and events. CHAOSS, people who are highly focused on a passion with a diversity, equity, and inclusion. You need to attract people that care about what you care about. Your badge means more to you than it does to them. Think about that. You apply for a badge because it means something to you. You want it to mean the same to somebody else, but ultimately it will be the nearest and dearest to your heart. You are using it to attract other people and bring together a quality group. So if the volunteers care about DEI, you're going to do a DEI badge. If your volunteers care about having the world's largest keyboard collection in the administrator's basement, maybe there's a badge for a admin that has keyboards in their basement. But there are badges out there for everything, and honestly, most projects out there probably qualify for 10 or more badges because maybe those badges don't have that much value or worth or assigned from a credible source. Those badges could be anything from most rock star contributors in a week to the analytics and metrics badge. They could be an event, it could be the number of food trucks, it could be the quality of the content or a year's established for an event. A quick look. We use badges because they get the attention of people who recognize and care about the information you're displaying. They care about your event, they care about your project, they're the people you want involved. So if you're hosting an open source event focused on DEI, and let's say CHAOSScon went 3 days in a big foodie town, and you're going to have the most food trucks at your event that any event has ever had in it at a single time. You immediately qualify for a badge from a TV network for your food truck extravaganza and that you're holding one evening during the conference, but you also qualify for a CHAOSS badge. And you are in the phase that the event is beginning to be planned, you have the metrics in place, you can apply for these badges, you have the vendors in place, but you are still seeking volunteers. You want to attract your volunteers. Are you going to put a badge on that says that you are the #1 ranked food truck event in the city, or are you going to put on a badge about your quality of your metrics surrounding DEI? It's maybe you want food aficionados and people interested in DEI, but the content of your event and the core purpose is DEI, and that badge should be front and center. Badges, information contained in other badges can be put farther back. It could be put in the event about page, it could be put in a document in your repository that has more information. It doesn't need to be front and center necessarily on your README. It doesn't need to be front and center on your event poster. It is secondary information. So your badge needs to attract a crowd that is primary information. It's what you want them to see first. I'm more likely to go to a event that's a DEI event with a whole bunch of food trucks versus an event that doesn't have food trucks. It's a perk. It might be fun to have a small thing in the corner as an incentive for people to attend, but it's not your primary goal. I personally would rather have a bunch of DEI experts helping at the event for conversation purposes than food aficionados who know nothing about the content of the event. But your metrics matter, not because they are only affiliated with your project and you are attracting people with them at first glance. Your metrics matter because your volunteers are also your evangelists. They show your reputation because of what you're measuring, and people who volunteer for projects and events want to be affiliated with something that they feel gives them value, and if they feel connected to your project, if they feel connected to your event, the perceived value of those badges goes up. And they want to be affiliated with something they can brag about, something that looks good on their resume. And they're not going to put a failing project on their resume. They're not going to put something with poor metrics on their resume. They'll go somewhere else. So getting those key people at first glance, very subliminally in the back of their mind, they're going to be thinking, oh, it would look really great if I was contributing to a project that had a certain high number of active commits every week, or it had a specific set of metrics that were important to their company. It could be an event that they might think looks good for a college application or a grad school application, depending on who your volunteer audience is. But you want to make sure that they feel excited enough by what they're seeing in your badges to use those images to brag about it to other people. Your badges are your bragging rights. They are what other people are going to use to brag about as well. And finding the badges, it's not always as easy as a Google search. If you Google open source badges, you're going to find some pretty crazy things. You're going to find open source platforms that are used for displaying badges. You're going to find people who have made open source badges for platforms that are silly, that are going to say, most commits while not sleeping. It might be a thing. It's good to have a network. I am sure that if we went around this room and spoke with everyone, you probably know some sort of a badge or some sort of recognition that maybe it's not an open source project, maybe it's your child's scout troop that you might suggest a badge to one of the other parents. Maybe it is a type of honor someone might want to go and get to further their career. It could be a badge you've seen and you recognize from another event that you might recommend to somebody else, but everyone here can recommend a badge. So networking, but find the people in your industry. Find the people who have close ties with similar projects, who care about similar things. Ask them how they got involved and what next steps you can take. Along the same lines, you can look at other events and other projects similar to your own and look at their posters. See what grabs your attention. Do a Google image search. Search for event posters from previous events and see how they recruited. See what they put on those posters and what organizations they might be affiliated with. And reputable sources have greater perceived value. Remember, a badge does not have value. You can't buy it. It's not going to make it so that people know that whoever has the badge is a gajillionaire or has the most available resources of any project in the world, but it is going to be something that attracts volunteers for things they care about. So if people affiliate their passions with a certain organization who offers a badge and they see other projects or events with that badge, they're more likely to take the time to stop and look at it. They're more likely to give their time and resources to volunteer for that project or event. If I was to go and see maybe 5 open source events that I could look at volunteering at, and 2 of them had a CHAOSS event badge, I would probably go look at those first and see what they had in their wheelhouse for opportunities. I personally am very close with the DEI projects because I have a disability. The inclusion factor is incredibly important to me. So looking at events that have that same passion piques my interest more than those that don't. Other places with perceived value would be like Linux Foundation. What badges do they have? You could look at older projects that have been working with foundations and have other recognizable accomplishments. And ultimately, though, it's investigation. How do you go about finding? How do you go about researching? It's use your networks. And that is what I have. My contact information is here. My Twitter is there. If you go there, you're probably going to find pictures of teddy bear collections and puppies, though I don't use it very often. So if you would like to reach me, you can reach me by email. Does anybody have any questions? My question to you is, what do you want to appeal to your volunteers or your community? Because if you want to attract the talent you need to find a group of people that care about the similar content or have a similar passion. And using that, it's an advertisement. I need people to volunteer who like puppies. Here's a badge about puppies, and this is going to attract all of the people that love puppies. So aligning, if you want to attract a community that is aligned with your values, you want a badge that closely reflects your values. So there are a few different options. There are badging backpacks that some organizations use, like Badger. And if you award a badge as a certain file type, then people can use those backpacks. And that will allow people to import badges to LinkedIn. There are ways to put badges that are awarded from other places on social media sites based on certain file type. At this moment, I am sorry, I can't remember the name of the file type off the top of my head, but it is, there's fairly common standardized badge file types that go across platforms.
Question in Slack, if you consider like t-shirts or stickers on your laptop as a form of a badge?
I do. I have t-shirts from volunteer opportunities and conferences, and that badge might not necessarily be a badge for me, but it is a badge for the organization I was with, because it shows that there was dedication and involvement to that cause. And the same goes with the sticker. I might have one of my computers does have a CHAOSS sticker on it, and it is it's a representation of what the organization is, and it shows that I'm an evangelist for it. It has, similar with, you can get stickers made of the badge that an organization has, and maybe your sticker says the name of the organization, has a picture of the badge under it and says, "Ask me about." That sticker there is a way to spread the message that your event, project, community has a specific badge.
On the same topic of associating with stickers or t-shirts, I was thinking that certain sponsorships or other organizations that are involved in certain projects could also reflect some of the values. It's not necessarily a badge, I mean,
It's an affiliation, and if we look at everything as a type of badge with just different perceived value, a sponsor has donated their time and resources to an event or a community and project with a certain set of values. Maybe you got those sponsors because your event has gotten a certain badge. They want to have their name reflected with something that has gone to the length to get that accomplishment. So you could, the same as attracting volunteers, you could use it as attracting sponsors, and your t-shirt then just says, these sponsors are support us having this badge. So in a sideways way, their reputation is reflected by your event having that badge.
Well, thank you, Katie. Next up, we have Sophia with Sifting Through the Noise, Behavior Change or Broken Machine. And also, as a reminder, if you want your CHAOSS badge, we have your wonderful stickers that you're welcome to pick up and put on your laptop or wherever if you like. And we have these exclusive CHAOSScon poker chips that we have for every CHAOSScon, there's a specific poker chip. So you can collect these and complete your collection of these. Also, as a reminder, go to the Slack channel and join the conversation there. We have some nice side conversations during the talk. One of them was about the puppies. And so I heard that dogs are really smart. Have you ever tried asking a dog what 2 minus 2 is? They'll have the answer. They say nothing.
That's the lady shirts on the wrong side. That'll work.
Yeah.
Hello, am I on? I'm on now. Okay. Well, I guess I'll get started. Hello, everyone. Great to see you here at CHAOSScon. My name is Sophia Vargas. For those of you I haven't met, I'm a program manager in Google's Open Source Programs Office, where I hold a role focusing on our research and analysis projects, typically working with our internal project communities, external project communities on things like project measurement and metrics. I've also been working with the CHAOSS community for the last few years, and I'm super pumped to be presenting at CHAOSScon. It's the first time I presented at CHAOSScon. I've been here a few times, so excited to do that. If you've attended any of my talks in the last year or so, there's been a similar theme around just the inherent messiness and complexity of a lot of the data sources that we use to generate metrics around our projects and how to make sense of those. In this particular talk today, the same theme here, but I'm going to be focusing more on interpretation. What do you do when you actually are looking at a series of numbers and say, if you're inside the project community, you have that personal context of what's going on in any day or any event. But if you're like me and you are often working with projects where you have little to no personal engagement with, but you're still trying to support them from an analysis perspective, sometimes you just have to wonder, how much can I actually trust the data that I'm looking at? Am I looking at an actual change, or is there something else going on that's causing the data to be a little bit more confusing? I will shamelessly be using examples from my own cats. This is Moby, who I will not trust alone with any of my plants. And not to say that you have to trust your data or not trust your data with that level of skepticism, but a healthy amount of investigation for me is always necessary to help me trust, help me understand how to interpret this based on the data set that I have. So one of the first examples I'm going to start with is a data set that I spent a lot of time in, the GitHub Archive project, which was started by a Googler in 2011. It's comprehensively pulling all of the events from the GitHub event stream and putting them in tables on BigQuery, organized by year, month, and day. And one of my first projects in this role was to better understand Google's contribution behavior as a whole compares to, say, the broader GitHub communities. And when I started looking at this data set, I realized that when I look at aggregate event types across each of the tables, they didn't always agree. If we went back earlier in time, they were almost always more precise with each other. But later and later, I started to see more variation between the yearly, monthly, and daily tables. So as an analyst, the first question is, okay, well, logically, if some data is missing between tables, how much data are we missing overall? And so one of the most simple ways to investigate this was we went ahead and rebuilt a pipeline for an individual repository to compare how much data we actually had potentially lost in the broader archive. And in this case, we found that this repository, we had only reported 87% of the full set of open pull requests in the same time period of 2001 versus the GitHub Archive project. So you might look at 87% and say, that's not great. I mean, it's a B+, right? But I'd rather have all the data. And so, okay, maybe not great. But then the real question is what did this decreased level of accuracy do to the metrics that we were reporting? And in this particular case, I was looking at the percentage of pull requests that ended up merged into the project versus that remained open or closed without being merged. And in this case, the difference was 74 to 79%. So maybe not as dramatic as you were expecting. And so I think that the takeaway I want to give here is that This data set has its problems. The ruling here is, I'm calling it a flaky API. It's really the rate limiting that GitHub puts against large comprehensive exports across the platform. That the project itself has been working to work with this and optimize for that, but as GitHub has grown incredibly in scale, it's starting to break down a bit. So something that we want to take away as stewards of the project to help improve accuracy of the platform. But if you think about the opportunity cost of rebuilding every single pipeline when you just kind of need to get a general sense of what's going on, it does a pretty good job. It doesn't actually change the numbers that much depending on the type of metric that you're pulling. So be aware of the limitations of your data set, but sometimes good enough is good enough. In 2020, I spent a lot of time looking at our data because I was trying to understand how, say, the global pandemic affected Googlers working in and around open source communities. So here again, I'm looking at the same data set, but this time a subset where we filtered out only data known for known Googlers by their volunteer GitHub information. As an analyst, I have to say, please excuse the lack of scale. I always hate showing numbers without numbers. But in this case, I didn't actually go through the PR process to get this published first. So I removed all the numbers so that we're only looking at shapes and I don't have to worry about problems with other things. So one of the things I noticed first here looking at this chart is that clearly we see a spike in October and we see a spike in the summer months. And across all the event streams, push events seemingly had the biggest spike of all. So first I thought about this behaviorally. Is there something about the way that we work around GitHub submitting push events and pull requests and issues that would cause push events to have such a larger growth rate month over month than every other event type? So to do that, I started looking at it per group, per person, per project, per organization, trying all these different various types of cuts and visualizations to understand what's going on here. Is this a real spike or something else going on? And when I looked at the push events per person, now you can see there's a bit of an outlier. I looked at the top 10 push events, Googlers by push event, noting this is a sample of over 10,000. And there was one person who had more than 4x the number of push events than everybody else. So clearly something is going on here. And so thankfully, because I know who this person was, I reached out directly and said, hey, what's going on? And in that case, they had set up a mirror to copy repositories between each other, and that mirror was failing. And instead of failing and stopping, it was just continuing to call and push and create all these additional push events. And that individual eventually noticed it and shut it down, but not before generating a huge amount of excess. So by working with them and understanding the repositories and accounts impacted by this, I was able to go in and actively remove that count. And as you can see, we still have a bump in the summer months, but it is dramatically reduced because a lot of that was just noise, and I didn't want to report that in our public numbers because it didn't represent real work done by a Googler. So in this case, the ruling was not real. In fact, the script run amok. So coming back to what we actually ended up publishing and sharing for the year of 2020, which I did want to show in comparison with 2019, given that 2020 was a bit of an anomaly. We still see now all the events are stacked on top of each other, and we chose to organize them a bit more contextually so that we took out the business of the chart. But we still have a fairly sizable bump in the summer months, as well as in October, and in October 2020 again. Does anyone know what happens in October that might cause something like this? You can shout it out if you know it. October. So that was my suspicion as well, and I went in and found that half of it was driven by October, but there was also a prominent Python release that happened, and we have a lot of issues that were generated around it. So in this case, I felt pretty comfortable saying that this spike was predominantly due to externalities, events, and a known release that caused a lot of activity in the event of publication. But this doesn't really explain what happened over the summer months. So again, I started looking at other ways to view the data. Here we're looking at just the events themselves. But what's more telling was when I started looking at the people and the time people were spending on GitHub. Say looking at the total number of active users every month and month over month. And here you can see that we also have a spike in the total number of people that were coming to the platform and doing work here. One thing to note is, it's already kind of giving it away because you can see it on the slide, but I wanted to sort of separate some programmatic changes that we made at Google. And in this case, in 2020, when we were forced to work from home remotely, we had our internship program, which usually depended on the provisioning of privileged machine access to our infrastructure, and we couldn't do that because we weren't meeting anybody in person. So instead of taking the entire program, we switched to open source as a way to be able to host our interns and have them work on projects with other Googlers. And so we knew that there was going to be a large impact from our intern population, and we wanted to make sure that I could actively isolate that impact. But as you can see, that the growth in activities was started before the interns showed up in April. In fact, it started in March when Google instituted our work from home mandate due to the pandemic. And so to better answer this, I went in and started talking to people, asking, did you change your behavior? What happened? What changed? And so not only were people hosting interns, but then the hosts actively were coming on and creating more activity. But then some teams reported that going remote that meant that they had to do more work asynchronously. So we found that some teams that worked around public projects were logging more events because they couldn't turn around and talk to each other. And then there are some people that I spoke with that reported open source as another outlet where they could go out and engage with the external community because we were all trapped at home and starved for connection. There are other stories and nuances here, but the more people I talked to, the more that I saw, okay, so maybe this wasn't actively changing behavior. Programs aside, we still saw changes in the way that we as Google were interacting on this platform. So I actually expanded the same chart here, but now I'm adding a third data point, which is looking at Get On Board, which if you're not familiar with it, Google runs their own internal Git hosting service. And in the case of public repositories that are hosted on it, some of our older projects like Android, Chromium, and Fuchsia are still hosted on Get On Board. So I personally love it as another source of information that we can compare it against GitHub. You can see the overall trajectory of growth is actually quite similar year over year, but GitHub is a lot noisier, partially because GitHub also includes personal repositories, personal activity, personal time. So it's harder to separate that out from, say, something like Get On Board, which is purely just work time at Google. So you can see the bump again due to the pandemic that we just talked about, but now we see a dip in October 2021, where we saw a spike in other years, noting that it didn't happen on Get On Board. So clearly this is a GitHub-related event. Does anyone know what happened in October 2021? Well, the first question that I had was, okay, is this a Google problem or is this everybody's problem? So I ran the event calculations for the last 2 years and saw that, okay, this is actually quite dramatically decreased in all events collected. And you might be able to pick out what's going on already from this chart alone, but I'm gonna spell it out more explicitly. This is an outage. We had a machine shut down and the pipeline stopped building for a couple of days in the month of October. So this was a public event, and so there is a public issue created that discusses what happened in this month. But if you're looking at aggregate activities, you might have just said, oh, there was a bit of a dip in October. I wonder what happened then. And without looking into all of these different levels, you might not have been able to isolate this. The last point I want to make is one that I just can't stop talking about it. And so I apologize for those who've been to my talks before because I bring it up every time. But say in our case of the push events spike, where we had a script running amok, not all activity that we see in these platforms is driven by actual humans and human-driven behavior. In fact, a lot of it is now bots, and I'm thankful that even Daniel already mentioned removing bots from a lot of these data sets, because as you can see, the growth in known bots on GitHub has grown incredibly since the launch of GitHub Actions in 2018. In fact, I estimated through a list generated by the Cncf DevStat project, which they used to actively remove bots from their total counts, which are also based from the GitHub Archive project for that platform. There were over 43 million pull request events generated by bots, which estimated about over 47% of all that event type logged in 2021. So this is incredibly substantial. So please remove your bots or isolate them from your metrics, because as you can see, they really are going to disrupt your numbers. So I wanted to walk through those cases because as an analyst who's sometimes only working with the data and has limited access to the people in these communities, I need methods for ways to help me understand the data set that I'm working with, understand the limitations, challenges, and complexities, or nuances of the data that we're looking at. So I start with trying to generate baselines, creating year-over-year, month-over-month comparisons. I really love using ratios per project, per org, per repo, per person. That's how we can easily find things like outliers in the case, again, of our push event incidents. Always being aware of your contextual cadences. people going on vacation in the summer, or maybe a lot of activity coming up to a release. So understanding what that release period is for the Golang project, we noticed we had to expand our time period to 18 months because if we looked at metrics year over year, they didn't make as much sense. The contextual cadence for that project was not based on year, it was based on that release cycle. An example that I didn't show, but one of my favorites is I was working with the Bazel team and they were creating a dashboard of downloads over time to track what versions were still in use by their user base. And if you've looked at download charts before, they can be a bit messy because there's a lot of flakiness in the way they collect downloads. But theirs looked like a sine wave, which I hadn't seen before, and realizing that we're now seeing the influence of regular, say, CI/CD processes that are calling the download function as a part of their process. And so you're not actually looking at humans downloading things, you're looking at systems interacting with these package distributions. And then always being aware of your externalities, sprints, events that could cause spikes or irregular behavior. The last two edge cases I want to talk about, and it's really just one, which is metrics that equal 0, please always share more context, especially if you're looking at any sort of arithmetic mean. If you have a 0 in there, it's all now a 0, which could mean that, yes, maybe you did have a 0 turnaround time in your issue response rate, or maybe there was just 1, and now that's dragging down your count. Or maybe you didn't have any data at all. These are very different things, and just having a 0 in your metric doesn't really share that story. So maybe complement it with a mean, median, mode, or additional verbal or qualitative context that can go with those numbers. And sometimes there just isn't anything to measure, which in itself is data, and it's worth recognizing that. I was working with a project leader who gave the feedback in one of my sessions that there's only 1 or 2 committers every few months or so, and he was having trouble trying to create metrics for his project. So we were discussing ways of how we could expand his potential sample, expand his time period, expand the number of projects included in the analysis so that you could come up with something, but sometimes you just have to accept that it's just a little bit too small. So generally, as a best practice, always include your bases, your sources, and your population context, because if you show me a number and said this is based on 5 contributors versus 500 contributors, I'm going to interpret that very differently. And again, apologizing for my own lack of bases in some cases, but that's just an extraneous circumstance. And again, because we are talking about projects with real people, and if you have the ability, they are your best resource. They can tell you what's going on at any moment, any time. Surveys can be a great way to collect aggregate context. And then again, if you have alternative systems or information sources to confer with, public blog posts, forum activity, content, websites, anything that can help you understand the cadences of a project in a community that you might not be engaging with directly. Depending on how much time I have, I'd love to hear either questions or other examples from folks in the room who've thought through similar confusing data, and I'd like to just stop and see where we go.
I have a question about the bots. You talked about identifying bots. Is there a systematic way to do that? Are there conventions, standards, technical means to assign commits, for example, to bots?
It's not great. Known lists are probably the best way. So the project that I mentioned, DevStats, maintains a SQL table of the bots that they know are actively bots. I wrote probably one of the ugliest SQL scripts I've ever written with a giant or statement. I was basically like, if it's any of these things, please count it. And so that at least is a crowdsourced way of collecting known bots, but it's never going to be perfect. Just writing in like bot will also collect people who have BOT in their handle, so that can be problematic. I also have run that before. Numbers were similar, but right now there isn't a great way of doing it. At this point, I know that GitHub does have some known tags where it knows it's a bot, like Dependabot's probably one of the most active ones. So even knowing what the top biggest ones are, removing them from your case would be fairly substantial. But I generally recommend keeping a list just because people name their tools whatever they want to call them, which could be not bot, so either include bot in it. GitHub also sometimes adds bot if it knows in brackets against the handle. Alternatively, finding, again, those outliers can sometimes be an indicator that it's not a person. The bigger challenge here is how do we distinguish between a bot and a person who's running a lot of automated scripts from a personal account. In that case, it gets a little bit more in question how you want to attribute this behavior, and I think that's really a question for someone who thinks about developer productivity metrics, because clearly we want to encourage more automation in development cycles because we know what that can bring to it. But now if you're running a script versus time spent on a project, how do we actually attribute the time you've dedicated now? And it kind of, I'm not really quite sure what the best answer is there. I'd love to hear if people have thoughts on it, but at least those are some of the ways that I've tried to distinguish it.
How do you identify the Google employees? Because if I were to do this for our own organization, at a certain point, people often have already a GitHub account, so associated with a different email address of their own, and then they join the company. And if I look back into the history, it's not associated with the company.
So we have a voluntary opt-in, where it's voluntold really. Ideally, people are sharing their information, but it's opt-in. You have to share it with us. So we maintain a data set that's people's personal GitHub accounts. That's part of our own internal data set. Others will look at the domain addresses associated with it. When we've looked at that for our own company, it's severely undercounting by an order of magnitude. So clearly, if that's all you have, that's what you can do. Some companies try to encourage people to have work personas. And that way, because I think as an analyst, I really struggle to differentiate work or personal activity. There's pretty much no way I can do that, and sometimes they can happen both in the same project. I have friends at Google who work, say, in the Kubernetes community, but then also sign in after work hours to do extra community calls, and clearly there's a bit of a blending between personal and work time. So I haven't quite come up with a great way to distinguish that without, say, designated specific accounts. But it is a volunteer basis, and so that does mean we think we're probably still undercounting. Like 1 minute, so. I'll share that my cats are Newton and Moby, both named after mathematicians. Newton's a lot smarter though. Okay, I think we're it. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sophia. We are now on break for the next 20 minutes, and we wanted to take a group picture with all of you. So what I'm hoping is that we can maybe take it up here, and I'll put up the CHAOSScon logo in the back, unless anyone has a better idea of where to take the picture. Amy?
Outside so we can take our masks off?
We can also go outside.
And then we don't have to wear a mask.
Do it here, go outside. Do both? Okay, then let's go outside. My worry is that we lose people on the way out.
I think we do it in here where we're not going to lose people.
Okay, let's do it in here.
Do you want me to just...
Where we stand, just there?
Yeah.
First on the dance floor.
All right, everyone.
Say. What do you want me to leave the stream on? I just left the speaker camera on right now and the mic's off.
That's okay.
Just so there's something there, it's not just blank.
Just say that we photoshopped the building around us and we were outside.
Yeah.
completely different.
I just got a message that my
Okay, next layer, Neil.
Yeah, yeah. You can sit, Neil, that's good.
I never get open slot.
Katie, do you want to, okay, yeah, scoot in a little bit more. Perfect. If you can see the camera can see you. In theory, yeah.
Close your eyes.
Okay, now hands in the air. Be excited. Hands in the air. Whoa! All right. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm gonna put it on my thing. I'm happy to do it on my devices. Which is
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say we have an OSPA, but it's also quite exciting day.
I have it, I can share the slides with you and then you can, yeah, you can just put the image, right?
Yeah, I can put the image if you give me a raw image.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a caffeine problem, I admit it.
Funnily enough, I found that it works better for me if I drink more water as opposed to more coffee or concentrate because caffeine dehydration and it drops my blood pressure to the ground, and that's why I start to struggle. So
So I will probably go and see if they have decaf because I still use hot water.
They may have.
I'll check. Because the other
There's only one thing.
Oh, okay. Because the other thing is that I sort of forgot how much I did not miss freezing in the air conditioning of the conference.
Yeah, it's like with them on, and I'm like,
I haven't really blood circulation, so when I sit down and there's any air conditioning going on and I just sit, everything slows down and I start to freeze.
well,
I start to get cold, not freeze. I'm not freezing yet, but I started to get cold.
I'm glad you made it because I missed you.
No, that was a really shitty situation in terms of my visa not coming through in time, and like, I think I might have been able to leave, but it was so risky.
No, it was not worth you counting it on getting home.
Yeah, I mean, not getting back to the US and losing the visa, I mean, it was shitty to miss the conference, but it wasn't worth it. Yeah, on that
Because the more caffeine I drink, the more I have to visit the restaurant.
That's the same with water too. So.
feeling I'm going to be talking more. Knocking around a bit, gently ease the. Well, I'd be rude not to. How you doing? Yeah. I wasn't sure if it'd be better to have you there out of the room, so yeah.
The other sticker we had when I was a kid was stickers.
Yes, now they were.
They didn't
hold up very no, not over history. I was like, I found the box of those ones too, and really.
I was not really very compared to you.
Right now, just tell people to put it in Slack.
Yeah.
Just want to speak up if they'd like.
Yep.
Because otherwise, we'll just be done at noon, which is fine as well.
Right. So, everyone, welcome back. The break is over. We're back in session, or we want to be. I appreciate that there's so much conversation going on. That's part of what this community is really all about. So I hope that you continue with that afterwards. Maybe over lunch. If you have something that, sparked a conversation, maybe you would like to share that with everyone. We have the lightning talks. If you have something interesting you would like to discuss, write in the Slack channel, let us know. Happy to take however much time we have at the end, 5 minutes, maybe even 10. Right now we don't have much going on, so Any topic that is on your mind, happy to share and talk about it. The Slack channel, by the way, is awesome. If you have the time, join it. We now have, I don't have my list with me, we have another talk that is a video. Now we have open source newbie experience on the CHAOSS project by Umidi.
And I'll be speaking on open source media experience on the CHAOSS project. Earlier this year, I was accepted into the Contributor 2022 program. It is an open source bootcamp that introduces people to open source contribution, and it was put together by Chico Africa. So I was speaking on my experience on the project, what I gained, what I learned. I will be speaking from the following: my idea of open source contribution before the contributor program, contributing to open source as a newbie, experience gained, and conclusion. My idea of open source contribution before the contributor program. Before being accepted into the contributor bootcamp, I was confused about open source. There was a lot of information on Twitter about open source. People post about their projects and ask people to come and contribute. But I found it difficult to follow through. There were times I tried to look at some projects to contribute, but I couldn't make a headway. I think partly because there's always a lot going on in various projects, and trying to find your feet can be a daunting task. Knowing where to start or what to contribute to as a first timer is also difficult. Some issues attacked first timer, but the descriptions of the issues are not clear. So it's difficult for someone who has never contributed to open source to make a headway. Contributing to open source as a newbie. The contribution project paired me with CHAOSS project, and I was part of a team of 5. We had 3 mentors and 2 open source newbies for the project at hand. The project given was to build a Slack bot to welcome newcomers to the CHAOSS Slack space. And the bot would also interact with the users. Before then, I had never built any kind of bot. And looking at the project details and the things we were supposed to do, it looked like rocket science at that point. The fact that there were other people on the team, we had mentors, and then there was another open source newbie like me. And when I felt encouraged, I could do it, and we started the project. We were given detailed information about the project, there were meetings, and the mentors went all out to ensure that we had the information and support we needed. And that was the push we needed. We broke down the problem into pieces and took it one step at a time. We looked for the best framework to use, and we settled for the Slack Bolt framework, and it became a success. And I can say that without having a support, I think I would have felt more confused. But because there was a support system and then there was detailed documentation of what we expected to do and in simple terms, and then there was also meetings. The mentors were ready to hop on meetings if we had issues, if we were not clear about the details, and if we needed technical help. So this encouraged and this helped and actually made the open source contribution easy. Yes, there was work to do, but we were able to do it. It was an amazing experience. And then, aside the fact that yes, there was a lot of support, there was also the learning curve. But it was easy navigating the learning curve. The programming language used basically was JavaScript, and I am familiar with JavaScript. But the project itself, of course, was a new area, and I had to learn a bit of Node.js, which is a plus, and then I had to learn how to use the Bolt framework. The framework is actually well documented, but there were features that we had to implement that were not explicitly stated, and we had to think outside the box to achieve them. For example, sending a type ID to members. It's not explicitly stated on their documentation, so we just have to read through the lines, look at other resources, and combine our programming skills and like, okay, we can do this and we will pull it off. And the time to go soccer, they call it for long. Experience gained. The program polished my existing skill sets and also developed new skills. My collaborative skills was sharpened, and my problem-solving skills, and networking skills. Also, I learned how to read documentation, pay attention to documentation, not just skim through. Because it's something that I didn't know how to do this, and I need to learn documentation to figure it out. Besides that, I picked up more skills, some Node.js, chatbot building, technical writing. I don't know that I learned that, but I did during this program, and I want to continue doing that also. And I can say I did a whole lot, because now when I'm in familiar territory, I find it easy to navigate. But I just realized, oh yes, so let's break down the problem and we'll go from there. And then if I have issues, I don't try to chill out to people, which is something I wasn't doing before now. But now I have an issue and I know this person will have an issue, and I'll reach out to you. And it has helped in my career path, it has helped in the project I work on, and it's been life-changing. I'll conclude by saying that contributing to open source has been my skills, my experience on the online days, and I see contributing to open source as my own way of giving back to the community. And I think more programs like Contribution should be created at least to help introduce more people to open source contributions. On this note, I'd like to say thank you to CHAOSS, thank you to SCH Code Africa, thank you to everyone that was on my team, Precious, Matt, Elizabeth, Ruth, thank you everyone. Bye.
Well, thank you for the for those of you who have not seen the podcast, go to the Slack channel in the in the newcomers channel, type newbie, and then the bot will greet you and walk you through so you can see. This is how you trigger it if you are already in the Slack channel. Otherwise, anyone who is joining CHAOSS now has the bot that welcomes them and walks them through, okay, what do you want to do? What are you interested in? How can we help you? And connect them with the resources that we have in the community. So it's a really great project that came about this week, this year. Next up, we have Santi's talk on the present and future of Grimoire Lab. Nothing good? Good? Okay. Yep, it's on.
Can you hear? Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Santiago, or Santi. I don't know if you know me, but I'm the CTO of Biterja, and I'm one of the developers of Grimoire Lab. This is one of the tools that we have in the CHAOSS community. And what we do is to analyze software, and create metrics for that. So, well, I'm gonna be frank with you because I've just finished the presentation because I have many troubles. Yeah, I have many troubles thinking of what talk to give to you. Because when some months ago I said, okay, I should talk about what we have been doing in the last few years in Grimoire Lab, what are the new features that we have, and what's going to be the future. But, well, probably the experience has shown me that you are maybe not interested in the technical things of Grimoire Lab during the years. So I've done some other talks about this for the last few years, and I was thinking of, well, I don't want to give you the same boring talk about the same thing, So yesterday I was talking to Danny in the airplane, telling him that, hey, I don't know what to do with this talk. I would like to talk about this and that, but probably the audience is not going to be interested here. So, well, we started working on that. Because my point of the presentation was also to bring people to the community. So that was the motivation. Like, what I want is that the software that I'm creating and I'm creating with others is used. And is used by all of you if you need it, or someone else out there, Because I've seen that, well, probably more people should have been using our tool because I think it's great. That's the first thing. But I know that it's not the best tool available possible. So what I want to do that is to bring more people and collaborate together so we can create a better tool. So I talked to Danny about this, and well, this is the presentation. So maybe it's not what you were expecting. Maybe there were technical people here that really wanted to know what's going on with Grimoire Lab and know all the details. But sorry if that's the case. But I will be here during this week, so you can come and talk about. We can talk about that. And well, I'll be happy if you are relieved because this is not going to be that. So, well, let me introduce what we have now. This is the present of Grimoire Lab. So, for those that don't know what Grimoire Lab
is it's a platform that you use to analyze, to retrieve data, analyze that data, and create metrics and visualizations about all the software processes or all the software development processes that your project might have. So far, we can analyze and retrieve metrics from more than 35 data sources. We have Git, GitHub, Jira, Slack, we have Twitter, Telegram, and some other random data sources are on there. As I said, we create we provide metrics for different interests. For example, community managers, DevRel, engineering teams, OSPO, ISPO managers, among others. And our platform, the good thing about our platform is that it has been used by others to create other platforms on top of that. For example, we have the LX Insights, so the Linux Foundation created that on top of Grimoire Lab. We have also Bitterja Analytics. Our tool is based on Grimoire Lab. Mystic, Compass, which is something new that the people from Hawaii are creating, Cauldron, etc. But I'm gonna go to talk about a little bit more about how we started and why we are here now, and why there are some barriers, some adoption barriers that we have in the tool, and why we arrived to that. So, first of all, our original idea was to create an open source tool. We are open source believers since we started in the university. Well, we probably know that we come from Universidad de Juan Carlos. So when we started studying there 20 years ago, we joined part of this group. It was something very different because most of the computers that we have in the university were Microsoft. We were using all these proprietary tools, and then we joined this group. It was CHAOSScon is the name, and we joined it, and it was something completely new because there's a different operating system, which is Linux, and it was amazing. So we started with that, and I don't know, we became believers. Daddy was studying with me and others that are part of Betweenness too. So we truly believe in that, and that's what we wanted, and because we think it's the only right way to do the things, to have open source tools. So another reason was that we wanted a tool that we could reproduce studies, because we came from a research group, and that's very important, like to be available to reproduce what others are doing, to try to find errors or problems in their studies. So that's one of the reasons, probably the main reason we had. We also wanted to have a platform that was modular, so in the way of Unix create their tools, no? You have a lot of tools that you can glue together and put together. So we wanted that, and so you don't have to use the whole platform. You can use different tools depending on your necessities. We also wanted to keep the data, because as you know, there are some tools, for example, Slack. You cannot have all the history of your conversation in Slack if you don't pay. And if you pay, you might lose that data. So what we wanted is something that can retrieve that data and keep that forever. Also, we needed the tool has to be incremental when the data is retrieved or when the metrics are retrieved, for sure, because we wanted to keep all the history of of the data or the project or the interactions that are in there. And also, we were committed to the completeness. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it well, but you understand that. So we wanted all the data possible and as more detailed as possible. Because you never know. Maybe one day you want to get some metrics from those fields that you have in the data that you are downloading, but later you realize, oh, I also needed this other field that was here, but I didn't download it. So now I need to start over again and download again all the data, and that's always a pain. So we didn't want that. So that's more of the more or less the ideas that we have when creating the tools, and we were focused on this, on have this. Like it's basically we were focused on data quality. Is what we wanted at first. We think that we have done that. We reached that to that kind of quality that we wanted, but while we were doing that, we missed other things that probably are more important for the end user. No? Basically, the installation of the platform of the tools is very complex. It's very complex to install it, to use all the different models that we have to work them together. It's not easy. Also the usability. We were probably the only ones that using the tool, so for us it was okay. We know how to use it, but so we don't care about this really. So if someone asks, we can answer, but yeah, this is not the way, of course. Documentation, we had all the knowledge, so we didn't have to ask others how we could use the tool, no? So we didn't make a big commitment on creating a good documentation, and also open governance. This is maybe shocking for you because we are talking that our main point was to have an open source community, but I think we reached that, but we could have been better in this case, no? So we knew that we have these problems, and for the last few years we have working on them and trying to solve them. So what we have been doing the past year or past two years regarding the first topic, which was installation. So we decided that we needed to have a better way to install the tools in the best way. Is also to have packages or artifacts that you can use. It's a problem if users that are not technical, if they need to download a repository and then run many different commands, compile the tools, and so on. That's always a problem. So we were working on packaging our tools, no? And also the availability of the packaging, because sometimes we weren't as fast as we should have done, as we should have been uploading those packages to repositories. Also with Dockerizing. Docker is a great tool for have users for the first minute using your tool, because you can say, yeah, hey, you just need to run this Docker image, create a container, and then you have everything. So we were focusing also on that part. And also in continuous integration of generating new packages in an automatic way, so people can have as fast as possible the latest releases of all the new features that we have. Also, we have been working on usability, because to use the tool, mainly you have to introduce the input data, the data that you want as input, using the configuration files. That's a problem. That's a mistake, a big mistake, and that shouldn't have happened from the very beginning. So we are moving from that, and we are creating user interfaces and APIs to add new projects, new identities, new repositories that you want to analyze and do. Also, we have been improving the documentation with the help of Benu. I think you know him, and I forgot the other name of this guy. Sorry. Well, we revamped the Grimoire Lab tutorial, so now it's updated. It's better, but there's still a lot of work there. So you can go there and try to use it, and if you find any problem, if you find something that is missing, please let us know. And also we were working on release notes. No, the idea is to have what we have done from one release to another in a way that end users can understand what the new features are, not to have release notes for developers, which is always a problem, no? And also to improve our the governance, we hired a community manager, which is Benu. He was helping a lot in the community, because in my case, well, I've been a father. I was a father last year, no, so I couldn't have time to commit to that. So we hired Benu, and he has been on the Slack channels. He has been in GitHub helping new users, newcomers, so on. So Benu has been helping a lot, and from here I thank that to him. And also we decide that, well, we should have new contributors, new developers, and more people involved in the project taking decisions. And that's why we decided that the people from Huawei, that created the Git backend should be part of the core developers. So now we included the repositories in Grimoire Lab, and they are core developers too. So we have having some talks to them, and we are trying to improve our collaboration and so on. So this is what we have been doing. But about the future, first of all, our idea is, and here is this is what I'm going to ask you, because as part of this community, is I would like to know from your point of view, from what you know about Grimoire Lab, how can we improve, and how can we create a better tool? Maybe you have some comments, and I would like to hear them, and all of the developers of Grimoire Lab are also willing to do that. So we think that is a good opportunity to have a standard in the industry, and that's what our main goal is to be the standard of software metrics analytics platform. So we have a roadmap. The roadmap is a kind of old thing, because we started with that before the pandemic, and we wanted to move it forward, but it didn't happen. But with that idea, we started working with a roadmap in Bitergia, and I think it's been great. And we learned a lot from that. And that's what we want to do in Grimoire Lab. So we are going to start discussing about the roadmap very soon. We are going to bring back the talks that we used to have once a week. Probably now we are going to move them to once a month or something like that. But that's what we want to do. And I don't know, I open this question here. If you want to answer, that's great. If you have some ideas, some comments, that's great. And the two questions are, which are the challenges to increase the adoption of Grimoire Lab? And, there's a typo there, sorry. Which are the strategies to mitigate those barriers that we have, no? In order that other people can use the tool, and we can have a bigger community. It doesn't have to be developers, of course, but we would like to have more users inside the program. from us. So and I think that's it. I can open the discussion here. We still have 5 minutes or 4 minutes, so if you have some comments, we can discuss. If not, remember that we have a booth at the conference we start on Wednesday, so you can find us there, and we are happy to talk about that. So, any comment, any question?
Yeah, I can speak for the current situation on how easy to get started. Because internally, I dropped the name of Wim or that, like we might do this open source in the future. And just the name, and one of the developers did some tuning for the process. We got it up and running for his own, this is sort of a demo in a couple of hours. So I think that's a compliment to
Oh, thank you. I thought you were going to say, no, we spent like 1 month trying to figure out it. We couldn't do it, so, okay, that's great.
Then, of course, the next step would be to sort of put it officially in production. We haven't done that.
Okay.
We have to take more things into consideration.
Yeah.
But to get going.
Okay, thank you. Well, one thing that we have been working in the, well, I think we can say this. We have been working with the people from Philips because they wanted to use our tool too. So we have been working on have the platform running in Kubernetes. So that's going to be the receipt. So well, everything is going to be open source very soon because that's what we also wanted. So probably, I don't know if this is your case, but I'm sure that there are many others that would like to have this running in Kubernetes to have in production. So. Something else?
Just great presentation, thank you. It's great to see how you acknowledge that you missed some kind of part at the start that will really then contributors into your project. I think it's really interesting to see that you hired a community manager who's really active in your business community. That's how I got involved in open source as well. Did you find that hiring them because they were quite trusted in the community really accelerated your adoption of the tool?
Well, I'm not sure about that. So I think he helped a lot, helping others, because, well, there was a lot of discussion going back and forward, like, no, I cannot, but he helped a lot, and of course, he saved a lot of time from us, no? So, because we could focus on what I was saying and not in the details of how to run these tools and so on. From that point of view, it's great, but I wish it, yeah, exactly. Okay, so I have 1 minute. Any other question? No? Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you at the booth.
No, just put it down. Yep, thank you, Sandeep. So as we're talking about metric platforms, here's a trick question for you. How do you make 7 even? You take away the S.
Alright, that was a better one.
So next up we have all the bugs belong to me, collaboration networks and project help by Kalia. And that's video, so I'm connecting.
CHAOSScon 2022. I'm Kaylee Champion. I'm a PhD candidate in communication at the University of Washington. Today I'm going to be talking about collaboration networks and project health. So how is it that some of our most important pieces of software, our shared digital infrastructure, falls into disrepair and neglect? Today, I'd like to give you an update on some work I shared with you at last CHAOSScon, including some emerging results from my dissertation. This is a true work in progress. New results are emerging all the time. I'm eager for feedback. So we might hope that the software we rely on the most would also be the best quality, but that's not always the case. Some components we depend on can be neglected. That's a phenomenon called underproduction. This sketch shows how we might think about underproduction, this relationship between the supply of high-quality software and the demand for that software in the form of importance. When quality is high but importance is low, we would call that overproduction, not a problem other than the potential for wasted effort. Alignment, we've got a match between quality and importance, that's the ideal case. And we have a particular concern when software is heavily used but relatively low quality. That's a problem. That's underproduction, importance is high, quality is low. So this heat map shows some underproduced packages, kind of those at-risk components I identified, doing a study of Debian Linux. Those are all kind of at the bottom here. And what I'll be showing you today is all about these factors that seem to be associated with this underproduced software. But I'd be happy to chat with you further about how I found these at-risk packages to begin with. All right. So we might have a few ideas about how important software comes to be neglected. And you'll see I've included spoilers. Green check when the evidence is leaning toward the conclusion, red X when so far my evidence is against this conclusion. All right. So one theory about how things become underproduced is decay. Maybe it's old, written in an old language, written a long time ago. Another might be just raw resources, just not enough people power behind it. Maybe it has people, but they're not a well-organized, kind of strong community in some respects. Maybe the people supporting the software have become isolated in some way. Other folks in the kind of broader maintenance community don't realize what's going on, or they just don't feel they would be welcome to pitch in. All right. So underproduced packages do indeed seem to be written in older languages, especially these pre-1980 languages. Lisp, C, I'm looking at you. However, packages written in the 1980s still can be, from languages written in the 1980s can still be underproduced. Packages written in languages from 1990 and beyond can still also be underproduced. And we see real differences between languages. So Lisp does very well, actually, if we break it out from its other kind of pre-1980s cousins. On the other hand, we see C++ doing a little bit worse than Perl these days in terms of how usage of the packages written in this language compare to the importance of those packages. Python and Java seem to do about the same as one another, but still a little bit of an area for concern. All right, so the age of the language is not the only factor to consider. There's also when the package itself was written. Languages change through time, so do packages. So this looks at when the package was added to Debian versus the kind of era that the language it was written in originates from. So what we see is underproduction kind of characterizing packages that have been in Debian for a long time and then falling off as the package was added more recently. That said, some of these 1980s languages like Perl, C++, seem to be doing relatively worse in recent decades. Okay, so another suggestion that we might make for explaining underproduction is all about the size of the maintainer community. But I found an interesting result here. If we just count the number of maintainers, just unique entries in the maintainers field, having one unique entry seems to outperform larger groups. And that's a little bit concerning. But when we kind of divide maintainership into styles, we see a couple different distinctions. Just taking that unique approach is not enough. Because a unique maintainer can be a single person, or it could be a pseudonym of a larger group of folks, maybe a subgroup within Debian, the games team, the sort of utilities team, or what have you. Many different individuals might be pitching into the package, might be a little bit willy-nilly, or it might be a mix of a group as well as some individuals. So we need to break apart these numbers just a little bit more so they can make some sense for us. So these are the 4 categories I'm using right now. Solo, team, loose, no group, mixed, that's a mix of group and individuals, and I'm identifying groups based on whether or not it's a mailing list versus an individual email address that's listed as the maintainer contact. And that's kind of typical within Debian to use a mailing list or use an individual. All right, so if we break it apart based on that maintainership style, we see that loosely organized groups do poorly compared to the other styles. Although kind of this mix of individuals and groups does not necessarily do better, maybe a little bit. Solo does substantially better, and team does substantially better. And one thing to point out here is that packages in Debian do vary in size, from very small to very large, which might explain some of the distinctions we see here. All right, so digging in a little bit further on these kind of loose collections of individuals versus the mixed model, where it's individuals as well as groups kind of taking on maintainership role. If we use a market share perspective about who's serving as the maintainer, what their kind of duration is of maintainership, we can think about that market share as having a kind of inequality. Maybe somebody kind of has owned the package for most of its life, but occasionally other people kind of pitch in, versus lots of kind of different folks, a rotating cast of characters serving as the maintainer. And what we see is that underproduced packages in kind of this bluish, greenish color here are characterized by kind of more equality in leadership. What does this mean? That means we don't have a single kind of strong leader kind of taking the maintainership role for long periods of time, instead it's handing off between different folks. And we see the same result here between the loose model and the mixed model. So leadership counts, leadership matters, is how I would kind of conclude from here. Next up, my last angle of attack is collaboration networks. So Debian is a network of folks who work together. People might contribute in one place or in several places, and when they close bugs in multiple packages, we might think of that as forming a network, drawing packages that share contributors closer together, pushing those with no people in common further apart. And this kind of messy example is 5 packages with the word mutt in the name. Mutt and neo-mutt right here are close together, which is not surprising because one is a fork of the other. The picture gets a little bit clearer if we drop out the people and leave only the packages that their work draws together. And framing bug closure as a network lets us bring out a lot of network analysis measures. Thinking back to those 2 categories of struggling packages, loose and mixed, we see in both cases, instead of being helpful, as we proposed, being centrally located, closely related to other packages by means of sharing the same people is a predictor for underproduction. And I'm thinking of this as a sign that these projects are essentially drawing water from a shared well. The more they share folks with others, the more we perhaps see maintainers who, as individuals, are just too thinly spread. All right, so where are we at right now? My observation so far is that there are multiple paths to success. Modern technology helps, but it's not a guarantee. And some communities with aging technology stacks do better than the average. Organizations help, but individuals can do quite well. And taking the lead can make a big difference when many people are pitching in, unless that lead person is spread too thinly. So what are my next steps? I'm continuing to refine these measurements, building models to try to control for different factors, working to validate these results with communities like you, sort of unpacking these sources of underproduction through time. I have some real chicken and egg problems here. The question is, do these kind of factors predict underproduction, or are they a consequence of underproduction? To sort that out, I really need to spread this data through time. I am seeking support to continue this work, and I am always looking to collaborate. Please connect with me. I'm eager for your questions and ideas, and I'll see you on the street. Bye.
Excellent, thank you. So now we are done with the regular talks, and we are moving on to lightning talks. And do you know what the ocean said to the beach? Nothing, it just waved. And so I'm glad that you didn't just wave at me, and you actually have some lightning talks lined up. We have one on creating a grocery store of metrics and models. Anton suggested Node.js project commit analysis or some preliminary findings or discussion on it. Sophia had the idea of talking about measuring usage, and then if we still have time, Dawn had offered to talk about usage of Augur and Grimoire at VMware. Did I overlook anyone that wanted to do a lightning talk? All right, that's a good selection. So, creating a grocery store of metrics and models. This is something that Kevin Lombard and I had just over coffee thought about. We have 70 plus metrics in the CHAOSS community, and we want people to find them and choose the ones that are most relevant to them. So how do we present them? How do we organize them in a way that makes sense? And one way that we've already started doing in CHAOSS is through the metric models, where we group them logically together. And now imagine you're not a community manager, but a chef, and you're putting together a meal, and you go to the grocery store to find the ingredients. When you walk into the grocery store, you walk through the meat aisle, through the produce aisle, through the dry fruit aisles, and all the similar ingredients are grouped together. But you not only find the raw ingredients, sometimes you already have pre-cooked ingredients. If you're looking for broth, you can find the base. You could even go back to the raw ingredients, make it yourself, or you can just buy the finished broth and just pour it when you cook. And so that's the idea, is how can we get a grocery store for metrics, where we identify what are the shared attributes that metrics have. What is that? Is it by data source, that we group metrics by where does the data come from? Or do we look at what does it tell us about a community? That we can come up with an aisle in our grocery store for what is the activity level, or what is the performance that our contributors have. Or maybe we have a group of metrics that is about understanding the types of contributors that we have. So that is work that is going on in the CHAOSS community right now, to think about these metrics in different ways so that we can present them and share them in new ways that make more sense to users, hopefully. So that is the idea of the grocery store of metrics. Any thoughts, questions? All right. Some of that work, I believe, is already in the works on the new metric presentation and the new website. So now you know. Next up, Anton.
Hello. Yeah. That's the way of that. Just 5 minutes. First of all, thanks everybody from Dublin. I live in Dublin, been in Dublin 20 years. Fantastic. Thanks everybody for coming to Dublin, sharing your experience, etc., etc. Really, really appreciate that. Just want to spend 5 minutes. I work at IBM. I've been part of the Node.js community for about 10 years. And over the past 2 years, I've been collaborating with some folks in Red Hat to understand how we get rot in our packages, and particularly in our web frameworks and our subsystems, and can we predict that? I didn't realise that Kaylee was going to talk about what she was going to talk about. There's some interesting work going on there. When I volunteered, I didn't realise that was going to be the next talk. So, but if you are interested in looking at Node.js as a data set and need some access to that data in order to perform some analytics, etc., or if you're interested in understanding how the long tail of the package ecosystems work, as opposed to sort of the big CNCF projects where there's large foundations behind it, etc., I'd love to collaborate with you on it and provide as much information as I possibly can. This session has inspired me. We've got the European Node.js Collaborator Summit is next month in the building behind us in WeWork. I'll be running a session on this, all the talks that have been done today on these themes, and try and build up some interest in the Node.js community to understand this. A colleague of mine, Beth Griggs, did a talk a year ago, I think, maybe 18 months, on these types of topics, and there was loads of interest in the community. She got lots of people trying to find out where she got the data from, etc., etc. So I think now we understand the impact of our communities and our community structures on our projects and the reliability of our projects, things like left pad and people making political statements with it, that we need to be able to potentially predict or at least understand the potential risk that's involved in our projects. With that, I will pass the mic.
Thank you, Anton. Should we switch to the other microphone? Yep, okay. So next up is Sophia with a conversation on usage, metrics for usage.
I need a slide. Should not run with a laptop, I think. I mostly wanted to put a slide together because I feel like I have like 10 metrics, and listing them out I just thought would be too much. This one? This one? Oh, it's working now. Is my slide going to show up? Well, I'm going to preempt it because I only have 5 minutes. This topic is, how do you measure usage in open source? Anyone works for a business support project or any kind of project community? This is clearly the $1,000,000 question that everyone wants to answer. How do we understand our users population? Who are they? How big is that? I hope my slide shows up because I want to show the next one, if it does. I'm just going to start listing them out. When I've worked with various project leaders inside and outside of Google, it's generally a broader conversation and using a bunch of metrics that are proxies to try to associate how much usage you're actually getting on the tool. So people use popularity markers, stars, forks, downloads. Hopefully you can have more metadata with that. Bobby Press with Stars project has been a really compelling model. Ooh, it's coming in and out. Let's switch. Okay. Ooh, that's still on. Sorry if you haven't noticed, my 5-minute marker means I'm just going to talk faster. I've also seen people use notebook citations for data projects, especially if they're like things like Kaggle or public context, where you can browse and search by what things are being referenced. That can be a fun way to find if your data project is being used. People, forum activity, mailing lists, where are users engaging, how many people are coming and subscribing to these lists. That can be kind of funky depending on how chatty these groups are, or maybe the chattiness is due to a problem, not necessarily more people coming to your community. Event participation can be a great way to look at hydrate for particular time. Surveys, always some sampling problems, but that can be some indication. Social media can be a factor of who's louder. Maybe you can see how many different companies are building off of this product. But I'm curious, clearly I have one more slide on limitations, but people, if you have any other proxies you've used to approximate usage around an open source project, I'd love to hear it. I've been asking this question every time I present a similar slide like this. I'm sorry this is a bit ugly, but it was thrown together. Anyone have any ideas?
We've been using as qualified user those opening maps and
Ooh, I like that. Okay, so like in a like support system, you have that.
We look at the amount of collaboration you've actually got going on, so not just individual contributors, but organisations that contribute as well.
Okay, yeah. Stack Overflow. I have one more comment because I'm probably almost at my 5-minute mark. Sometimes when I look at this, it's also sort of the question of reproducibility and whether or not you have access to things. There can be even more sources, but I don't like to list them unless you have that data available to you. Things like web and content analytics are maybe only visible to the website owners. They're not generally available. If you have the ability to see usage on platform, I really love the data.container report because they're showing aggregate monitoring statistics from their platform and usage. Not everyone publishes those kinds of data though. If you read the Census 2 report out of the LF and the Harvard collaboration, they calculated a Z-score that was a combination of package dependency, usage, and looking at usage inside of organizations, which is not public information, but they were looking at it across a broad set of organizations and trying to create some value score that they could associate between cross packages. And I know, I'm constantly faced with it. Well, what does this look like for another project, for another community, for another foundation? So always caveating, can you repeat this project? Can you repeat this exercise for another project? And those kinds of comparisons can help you even just like gauge relative community size or community levels of activity, but maybe we just have to accept the fact that we just can't really ever produce this perfectly unless we put some sort of innate tracker in something which steps over too many boundaries, in my opinion. And then, if anyone's heard of any other tools, I mentioned Scarf. There are also dependency analysis. People like to use the big package managers as ways to look at downloads across those, but again, that's somewhat subjective. Any other examples? Well, I'd love to hear them if you think of them later. This is a hard problem. We're all thinking about it. This question is never going to go away. And that's the end of my 5 minutes.
Thank you, Sophia. John, we still have time.
Okay, can people hear me? All right, so Matt pointed out that nobody had talked about Augur, and we still had some lightning talks open up, so I thought I'd come up and talk a little bit about Augur and Grimoire Lab and how we use them at VMware. So the problem that I had to overcome at VMware, so I work in the open source program office, and we have over 10,000 repositories spread out across a couple dozen GitHub organizations. So we've got all this stuff that's really spread out, and what I wanted to do from the open source program office was have just a couple of really simple metrics to help projects understand how they can improve. And so what I did was I had Sean Goggins, who sadly could not be here this week, spin up an Augur instance to put all of this data into. And what I did was what I like about Augur is it's just a Postgres database on the back end, and so I can write all my own queries and display exactly what I want to see. So I picked 4 really simple metrics. So I look at contributors. So is an entire repository contributed mostly by one person, which is a risk, or is it nicely spread out across multiple people? Are people responding to pull requests in a timely manner? So our guideline's 2 business days. Are people keeping up with pull requests? So for the pull requests that are open, are they closing about the same amount in any given month? And then I also look at when releases are happening. So for me, that's an indication that the project is active, they're fixing bugs, they're fixing vulnerabilities, and actually getting those out into a release. So those were the 4 things that I picked. And the reason I picked 4 really super simple metrics is because what I've learned the hard way with a lot of these dashboards, Augur and Grimoire Labs and any other metrics dashboard, is they are fabulous for community people and metrics people. You show them to executives or just individual maintainers of projects, and they just don't know what to do with them. They look at all of this stuff and they don't know where to go, they don't know where to focus, they really just don't know what to do with all that data. So I've got my 4 really simple charts that I pull out of Augur. But our community manager team, what they do is they've actually spun up a Liturgia instance using Grimoire Lab. And so those are the hardcore community managers with really important strategic projects. And they do have those gigantic dashboards, but they know how to dig in and pull relevant insights out of those. So for us, that's been really important because on the one hand, every individual maintainer, executive, anyone who cares about a project can see 4 simple metrics about whether or not it's sort of trending towards healthy or not. And then our individual community managers who really need to dig into stuff, they've got a Grimoire Lab dashboard that they can dig into. And then I think my takeaway for the approach that we have to metrics at VMware is really around project health and making improvements. So I have had in a couple of cases where executives have kind of tried to sort of weaponize my metrics, and that's not what they're for. They're for individual projects to make improvements, because I've set arbitrary thresholds that really aren't that meaningful. And what I really care about is that the projects can have some data where they can say, oh, maybe we should respond to pull requests more quickly, or something like that. So I just want people to think about their project and think about ways that they can improve. Any questions? Yeah, in the back first.
Can you repeat number 4?
Yeah, so I look at frequency of releases. So specifically, I look at, are they releasing maybe about 6 a year? So not like big releases, but like point releases of bug fixes. And I actually did talk on this on CHAOSScon North America, not this last one, but the one before. And so you can actually see those graphs if you go back to that talk. Yeah.
I have a couple, but I'll just ask one now. So do you also use those metrics to compare projects?
No, I deliberately don't actually, because every project is different, and what I want the projects to do is to interpret the metrics in light of the other things that are going on in their project. So for example, if we've got an open source project that supports like a product release, and they're working up to like actually making a release, there's going to be a lot of activity, and then maybe after that activity people are going on holiday, and maybe it dips for really good reasons, or maybe most of the development teams in Europe, and so July and August are going to be slow. And so I want people to think about how they interpret those metrics in light of all of the things that are going on for their project. So I deliberately don't try to compare them across. Other questions, or are we out of time?
We still have time if there's more interest for conversations.
Yeah, okay.
What frequency do you use those metrics?
So we calculate them every month. So so I always make sure there's like a full month of data, and we track them over a period of a year. So we have a year's worth of data, and it's done by month, with the exception of the contributor stuff. So that's kind of across the whole year. We don't have that like monthly.
Do you have any idea of when you check in to review the metrics? When teams review?
Yeah, so we actually have, so we don't check in with all of the teams because hundreds of repositories, but we do check in with the strategic projects. So I have 2 people on my team, one who works on VMware originated projects, and the other one works on our contributions to third-party projects. And at least for our strategic projects, of which we have roughly 30-ish, they do detailed project health assessments with those, and they do go over metrics, not just our metrics, but in the case of third-party, like Cncf stuff, we look at dev stats, and we do more detailed assessments on those, and we do those for each project about twice a year. At least once a year. Yeah.
I started doing metrics, and everything seems very stale. So if I check in once a year, it seems good enough.
Yeah, it just depends on the projects, like how big the projects are and what the activity looks like. Okay? I think I'm out of time. Okay, sorry, one more.
I want to go back to the weaponizing.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you're avoiding going into finding metrics that you can tie to business objectives. Can you talk
It's because every project is different, and I'm dealing with a scale of like hundreds of repositories that have enough activity to do metrics on out of the 10,000 repositories. And the way that people were, what I would call weaponizing them, was that somebody had tried to write objectives, key results, these OKRs, as every project has to be healthy as defined by the OSCO project health metrics. And those use arbitrary thresholds that work for a lot of the projects and absolutely don't work at all for lots of other projects. And so what I didn't want were executives saying you must meet this arbitrary deadline that some random person, me, and OSCO set, which is not appropriate. So what I got them to do is I got them to change it and say it was something, we landed with something along the lines of I'll take one action to improve the health of my project per quarter or something like that. So they can seek to improve whatever part of the project they need to improve, whether or not it's something that I'm measuring, which seemed more appropriate to me.
So the community management doesn't work. There's like time divided for different.
Yeah, because for the strategic projects, we should be doing that. And so they're doing a lot more sort of hardcore analysis on their individual projects and tying those back to things that the business needs, for sure. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Dawn. And thank you to all of you for asking excellent questions and participating. Matt, yes?
There was one question that kind of came my way, which is just trying to understand from the people in the room what tool you are using with respect to implementing open source community health. It's not impacted by using Augur and Marlab. Kind of curious what other people are using.
Scaffolytics. We also do a lot of custom stuff that I scared to say that you have to do that.
Yeah, I don't know much about field. But I like to use so for all the projects that are running from the installation, I'm doing updates going on the annotation side. That's right. And we use mainly the data. That's what so we use that tools that are very
On our side, we're using the Augur data and connecting it using like Dash and Spotly and making dashboards that way. So we're getting the data directly and then being able to build custom visualizations in dashboards.
Any other tools?
We've recently started using Orbit. It's not local, so we don't have someone else to I use them.
All right.
Until the Red Hat OSCO. We're still, the naming is no brand.
Well, then also thank you to all of our speakers for providing so many insights today. Thank you to Shandor, who is helping us with the technology today. Thank you to our sponsors again. And did you?
And Andrew for the live stream.
Andrew, yes, thank you for the live stream. Thank you to Elizabeth from Remote, helping with promoting the event and tweeting, live tweeting. Thank you, Matt, and Ritik. I saw you a lot in Slack, and Amy, and many others. So thank you just for this really lively event. It was really awesome to be here. Thank you to the Linux Foundation for hosting us again. I have one last dad joke for you. What did one ball say to the other? I'll meet you at the corner. And so I hope that you all can now use this opportunity to meet, get together. We don't have anything formally planned. If you want to go to lunch, look around, see who else is going for lunch now. And yeah, just continue the conversations. Thank you so much. It was good having you all.